Hello, everybody. It is January 19th, Monday, Martin Luther King Day here in the States. And this is the return of 15 Minutes of Frame. I'm Nick Frame. And today we're going to talk about price of video games, DLC, expansion packs, all sorts of fun stuff. I've been seeing a lot on Twitter, new games coming out and people being upset about DLC and day one DLC, and I think it's a conversation that needs to be addressed. First things first, video games are changing. I think that's obvious, but it bears pointing out. Just like other industries have changed, baseball games have changed, going to the movies has changed, books have changed, things change. That's life. Video games haven't changed nearly as much as other industries, especially price-wise. I was doing some research. Original Nintendo games cost $40 to $60 at release. Adjusted for inflation, that's closer to $80 to $90. Your mileage may vary, depends on the year, depends on which currency you're looking at, but ballpark, video games used to be about twice as expensive if you adjust for inflation. And since the price isn't going up for the base game, and games in general are getting larger, more detailed, more technical, that money has to come from somewhere. And for a long time, especially on PC games, that money came from expansion packs. They would release a game and they would come up with some additional content, and they would release an expansion pack. Basically, more campaign, more characters. And today, expansion packs have really gone by the wayside except for MMOs, which ironically is one of the few areas where really we don't want expansion packs. DLC would make much more sense. But for the last 5, maybe 10, depending on how you want to look at things, years, we've been seeing an increase in DLC. And DLC is a really broad term, and really we should rein it in a little. There's 3 main types of DLC in my opinion. You've got the DLC that's cosmetic, new outfits for your character, new skins. That kind of DLC, especially on day one, is fine, because the people who make that additional art usually don't have anything to do leading up to the game's release. A lot of the art assets are usually done by then, and so they can, the artists can work on new content that way by creating new outfits and stuff. There's also playable character DLC, where, like Borderlands, for example, you've got core classes, and then they add additional classes via DLC. I'm a bit more on the fence on that, but honestly, if they're releasing a game with a reasonable amount of content, where if you didn't have these additional classes you would still feel you got your money's worth, releasing them for additional fee, I don't have a problem with, personally. I know some people do. Some people are very much of the opinion everything that they create up to the point that the game is sold initially ought to be included with the initial purchase price. And I understand where that thought comes from, but honestly, for a lot of what we purchase these days, that's not the case anymore. My mother used to go to the movies as a child. She'd pay like 10 cents, 25 cents in the morning and get to watch all the movies. She'd just get to sit in the theater and watch movies all day. Nowadays, you go to the movie theater, you pay for your ticket for a show. You don't get to watch the other shows, you don't get free candy or popcorn, you just get the movie, and there's still ads, and there's all of that rigmarole. And so, it's buying a video game now is a lot like going to a ball game. Yeah, you get tickets to see the game, but if you want the program, if you want drinks, if you want anything, you're going to have to pay a bit more. And so, assuming that they're still providing good quality for the base game, you're going to see some DLC early on, earlier than you'd like perhaps, that covers what it is that you're assuming should be in base game. There's going to be some overlap, and that's okay, because as long as you get $50, $60 worth of game from your $50, $60 game purchase, why should it matter if somebody has spent more money and is getting a bit more game? Ultimately, it comes down to the consumer deciding, is this additional character worth an additional $5, $10? And I think that's, in many ways, a positive change. It really helps consumers decide what they want. And it helps tell the game manufacturers what it is exactly about their game that they're interested in. Now, if you take a game like Super Mario Brothers, the original Super Mario Brothers, you have 8 levels, 4 zones in each level. Levels. Swap them depending on your point of view. If they pulled out World 6 and World 7 and released it as a 6-world game with Day 1 on the cartridge DLC, yeah, that gets a little more dicey. That's a bit more money grabby. And I think that's one of those situations where people are a bit more justified in going, hey, wait a minute. Now you're just cutting up your game and selling it to us piecemeal. And in that sense, no, I don't think that that's really appropriate. If you're taking a full-sized game and chopping it into pieces, then you shouldn't be charging full price for what you've got left. And there are a few manufacturers who are doing that, and they get called on it, and they slow down on that. But if, like, you take the original Super Mario Brothers and give it a different pricing model where each world, World 1, World 2, World 3, World 4, World 5, World 6, World 7, World 8, where each one's $5, or even $10, but then you have like a bundle deal where for $50 you get all of it, I could see people being a bit more open at that. And Super Mario Brothers perhaps isn't the best example just because the game was really small. If you go back and look at it, they didn't have a ton of content. Certainly no multiplayer, no online component. But it's that sort of mentality that I think we need to look at. The other issue, going back to expansion packs, like I was discussing at the start of the show, MMOs still have this expansion model, and I feel it's really outdated. And my cat's about to jump on me, so... take an expansion for World of Warcraft like the Burning Crusade. You spent $40, you got a new continent to explore, you got 2 new races, you got a new profession, a new PvP zone, in levels 61 to 70. Now, if Blizzard had chopped that up to a more DLC like minded method, they obviously couldn't back then. Their pricing structure wasn't designed for it. But imagine, in this magical fairyland, that you could, for say $20, get level 61 to 70 and access to Outland. And then for $15 each, you could get Blood Elf or Draenei, or for $20 combined, get both. Maybe $5 for the profession, $5 for the PvP zone. So people who don't want PvP don't need to buy that. People who don't like Blood Elves don't have to buy them. Take a more indirect look at things and price it accordingly. It's the pricing model of a lot of the MOBAs these days. And people aren't as upset when League of Legends or Dota releases new characters that you have to pay for, because the base game is free. And I think that ultimately we're going to have to get to the point where we decide what is it exactly we want to pay for when we're buying a game. I think PC is a bit stronger in that area. It has a much wider gap in game prices, thanks to things like Steam and various sites doing sales. Consoles are a bit firmer in their pricing for games, just due to the nature of the beast. It takes time to print that stuff. It takes time to test it and make sure it works. And it's harder to patch. And so I think you're going to continue to see a bit of a gulf. I think you're going to continue to see an increase in DLC because game prices are dropping. It doesn't feel that way when the price has been $50 for 25, 30 years now. But thanks to inflation, the prices are dropping. It costs you, due to the drop in buying power, it costs you less to buy the same amount of video game compared to other things like gas or soft drinks or potato chips. And so you've got this difference in price, and you have to also understand that wages have gone up, the amount of production time has gone up, and these people need to get paid, and so you're gonna either we're all gonna have to go, look, we're okay with paying $100 per game for a console game, or we're gonna have to continue to see more and more DLC, because there's no middle ground. Prices keep rising for everything in regards to video games, other than the actual price of the video games. I remember when 360 and PS3 games started running at $60 rather than $50, and there was this huge uproar of, the video game companies are taking all our money, but really they're not. The price of video games, honestly, is at an all-time low comparatively. And while it would be lovely if we could all afford all the video games we want, the reason it's becoming more and more evident, is people want more and more video games as part of their collection. Back when I had a Nintendo and a Super Nintendo, neither console I ever owned more than 10 games for. And most of my friends usually didn't have huge collections of games. Some had more than others, but honestly, it's thanks to things like Twitch and YouTube, seeing all these games, that now people are more exposed and want more games. And so eventually, people will come to the decision on how they want to pay for them. But yeah, next time you see a game coming out with day one DLC, take a look at what that DLC is and make your decision then as to whether or not it's reasonable. That said, I'm basically out of time. Thank you all for coming out. I'll be back in a couple days on Wednesday at 4:15 p.m. Central Time. Thank you all for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.